Hello, Spooky Toad, Bad Toad, it's Matty here. Going to do some, not full feedback, but I'm going to do a thoughts video on your map, Berlin Redux 2, by your request. This time I'm running the map off my local source mod server, instead of running it in the client, so that means I get the Deathrun plugin. I don't know if I enabled weapons though, I think I did. Okay, as you probably know, haven't really played this map before, so you'll get my first impressions. Ugh. It's cold. Ooh, a random number generator. How interesting. Probably don't need to do that.
Friendship ends in
Hopefully you don't have an AFK kick, or I'll be screwed.
3, 2, 1. Control point enabled. Woohoo!
Wow, that's impressive. Pretty good. Oh, there's our man. Could probably do with a soundscape, because right now there are no environmental sounds. Maybe allow us to get access to these, because at the moment I'm sort of clipped in. I would like to interact with them, but that's just me being stupid. First thing I will do is investigate somewhere to see if it's a potential Easter egg, or, you know, I'm clipped off over here as well. Isn't it? Well, I don't know. I guess you have to sort of prevent people from going everywhere. Otherwise, they might think that they need to go over here. There are better ways to stop people going to different places than just an invisible wall, such as like barriers, you know, or props or whatever, just to show people that this area here is walled off. So very interesting. These flags here are obviously brushes, and the textures have been stretched. Looks a bit strange. I don't think they should be brushes. I think they should be single faces. So you could have a brush here with the sides, or maybe just make it thinner, I suppose, because at the moment it looks a bit thick. But the effect is quite good, if not a bit too striking, perhaps. Quite a noisy symbol. I'm not quite sure what's going on in here, but I know there's a rope. Shit. Okay. Oh, like a shadow here from my dynamic prop. Your displacements could do with being, or the textures could do with being aligned a bit. I think there is a value for displacements. Prevents them from stretching, but I don't think that works in TF2, I can't remember. I'm guessing this is a trap. The blue spikes look a bit unrealistic. They look like they're made of plastic. Maybe a material that looks like rusty metal or something. Or perhaps making the spikes less uniform looking. Because at the moment it's just a row of spikes that have been laid rather accurately, like with a ruler. So perhaps just spread them around a bit, you know. Unless this is actually a trap made by the Nazis, in which case I suppose something that looks military would be suitable. I'm guessing the trap here is a basic plank break trap. Problem here is I can't jump very high because the ceiling is quite low. So there isn't really much room to escape here, you know, very likely to die. That is, of course, if the plank just breaks. Given that this is the first trap, I presume, you have your largest number of players, so this is rather a narrow trap for so many players. You could make it larger, more complicated, perhaps by having several pits or different tunnels. Maybe you could also have single individual planks, because they're more likely to break than 4 planks, balancing the load across them. You could even have a plank to the left, a plank to the right, and you'd have 2 sets of traps there, making them more narrow. So twice, well, you know, you'd have some players on the left, some players on the right. But I suppose the wide channel here is quite useful, because having such narrow planks as your first trap would be uncomfortable with so many players squeezing down them. So perhaps maybe improving the trap a little bit, maybe turning this area into a set of tunnels with individual planks, but making them shorter, so that they are and jumpable, you know, perhaps, or something like that. So they're easy traps that can catch out people who aren't paying attention, or maybe get the jump distance of a fastest class. Say you're medic, maybe find out the longest jump distance. If it's, say, 200 units, then maybe you could make the plank the distance longer than that, 250 or something, so that you cannot just leap straight over it. You at least have to be on there before you can jump, so there is still some risk. Let's say, take into account the average reaction time for a player and the activator. Let's say I'm using my bat to hit a button. There is a very small delay, maybe 0.2 seconds or quarter of a second or something, between me clicking my mouse button and my bat striking the button. Very, very small delay, maybe even 0.15 seconds. Then there's also the reaction time, me going, oh, there's a person there who's in the trap zone, and then deciding to press the button. That's probably going to be up to about half a second, maybe less. And then, of course, there's the slight delay in positioning yourself over a button, especially if the activator's path is quite cramped. So let's say 0.7 of a second in total. If you take the run speed of 400 units per second, work that out to see how many units you can run in 0.7 seconds. So let's say it's 320 units. That's actually quite a long distance, I can't be right. That's per second. So, boom. That's about 300 there. Or the reason I'm saying this is because you can sort of work out how long the player should be in the trap zone before they can escape. Boom. So if you give me 0.7 seconds of escape time, then that means I've got a chance to beat the activator's reaction times. Of course, that's the maximum. Well, that's probably the longest likely delay time or reaction time of the activator, and most of the time the activator's reactions will probably be half that, especially on a very good activator who can anticipate players because they'll be right next to the button. They may even be using plus U's. So perhaps shortening it even to, say, 0.5 seconds or less of potential escape time. So that's about balancing your trap. So yeah, this looks to be some kind of tripwire. I'm guessing this is an automated trap. Yeah. It's rather interesting. Pretty good. I mean, it's straightforward. Ooh. But again, I can't jump over it without triggering it because of the low ceiling, unless I do a crouch jump. And I always try to avoid crouch jumps where possible because they're uncomfortable to perform, and if you're a new player you may not be familiar with a crouch jump. You only really learn about crouch jumping when you do rocket jumping and stuff, whereas the people who've been through Half-Life and they learned in the tutorial how to do a crouch jump, we're okay, we've got that advantage. Okay, maybe I did. Okay, now I realise. That's rather a tricky trap, it requires a bit more skill. I'd probably place that a bit further up in the list of traps rather than having it as the second, because it's likely to kill off a lot of newbies, but then again it is a fairly simple trap. But if you try to keep your easy traps at the start of the map, even if they're so easy that only a small number of people, if anyone, will be killed by them, then you know, you at least give new players a sense of accomplishment because they've managed to bypass a trap, rather than going, oh, I'm dead at the second trap, oh, I'm really crap at Deathrun, you know, that sort of thing. Lol. Okay. Now this looks like some kind of minefield, I'm guessing? It's a bit strange how it's laid out in such a clear grid. I'm not quite sure what happens when I go over them. They could even be some kind of emitters, gas emitters, I'm not sure. But they're made of metal, it seems. Oh, and they're actually floating slightly as well. So I'm guessing they give off flames. I suppose that does tie in with jungle warfare and things like that. Well, let's be honest, if you look up I think it was the Vietnamese tunnelers and what have you, and what the Americans had to do to get inside the tunnels and stuff, and the kinds of traps they had, really interesting. Like they'd have false tunnels, booby trap tunnels with fake floors, or just explosives, you know, and tripwires. Really simple stuff. Really good. You'd also have gas as well. And here's an interesting fact for you. The way they separated sets of tunnels so that you couldn't just gas a tunnel was to have a tunnel go underwater. So you'd have to go through the water and then come back out of it. And the gas couldn't go through the water. It's very clever. But of course, by going into the water, you make yourself vulnerable. You have a light here, and you have pitch darkness. That makes no sense. If you took this light away, the tunnel would probably be naturally dark, and you wouldn't need to simulate the darkness by using overlays or whatever. It's also strange how the brick wall here goes behind the dirt displacement. I know that you see that a lot in TF2 maps, but if I were to build a brick wall, I wouldn't like only uncover a certain amount of brick wall. I'd go, right, let's build a brick wall, and everything else would be rock or something. But the rock would be behind the brick wall, and I'd fill it in with plaster. Here I am in the next place, abruptly teleported. Perhaps it would be better to have an actual ladder or a staircase to go up to the next area, rather than just being magically transported. I'm not quite sure how I'm here. I'm guessing there's supposed to be a hole in the floor, but I'm inside a vault, it seems. I'll clip this off. This is interesting. Your illumination, you've got these lights here which are apparently quite bright, but they don't do a very good job at illuminating the hallway. It's still quite dim. Doesn't make too much sense. And for some reason you've got a red light above the lights. Could it be that something is a light entity is passing through the prop or something? I'm not sure. Looks a bit strange, that's all. Here I'm guessing is a gas trap, I'm not entirely sure. Not really much I can say here. It's a fairly straightforward kind of trap, and it's positioned fairly soon after the first set of traps. So I'll go through the traps later on as the activator. Textures appear to be misaligned here. Your beams could be a bit more nice if you align the texture so that these bits are on the outside. That would look more realistic. But I'm sure you realise that, so you're not stupid. Be mindful of crates, because these crates, they have to come in from somewhere. You know, you have to have like a loading bay. So if you've just got a corridor with no access to a loading bay, that means that the crates must have had to fit through the door. And this may not be a storage corridor, but then again, you do have kind of overspill and things like that when you've got not enough room in a warehouse. You might put things out into the corridor, but I don't know. Corridor doesn't need to be decorated with these kinds of props. You know, a corridor is a corridor. The lighting can be used quite well to make a corridor seem more interesting, and also you can use overlays, decals to put scuff marks, scratches, handprints, etc. Signage is quite good actually. If you're in a base, then especially a complicated base which has a network of tunnels, whatever, then it can be quite useful to have signage just to give the impression that the people who run the facility are showing people where things are. It will also give me an idea as to what I'm doing in this place. As far as I'm aware, I've come over some battlements and I found myself in some building. I was teleported to a tunnel and now I'm teleported into a corridor. I don't know what my purpose is. I'm guessing I'm performing some mission. Looks a bit weird. Okay. This sign is a bit unnecessary because there is only one place we can go. Stay between tanks. Right, okay, fair enough. Oh, is that because the tank shoots? Yeah. Maybe you want to let people figure that out on their own. Because if you've gone to the trouble of making the trigger hertz or whatever, I'm guessing there must be explosives. Oh no, the trigger hertz must be static then, okay. If you've gone to the trouble of adding in separate trigger hertz zones for the projectiles, people have played Office, you know, they realise from experience that you can stand between the snipers and not get shot. So you probably can get rid of that hint message, let people work it out for themselves, or they can watch other players and learn from them. Human beings are like chimps, you know, monkey see, monkey do. Again, you don't really need this sign because we're only going one way. This wall texture here looks misaligned on the ceiling. I would go for something plain, not tiled, because it sticks out too much. Try not to use detailed textures on things that the player doesn't need to see, like the ceiling. Ceiling always reminds me of a padded room. If you were to make an underground facility, typically they have beams across them and concrete. Or it could just be a rock, you know, rocks and shit. Or it could be tiled with an arched ceiling. If you look at there's television programs like Nazi megastructures and things. You can look at wartime bunkers, and they give you a bit of an idea of the kinds of things that they would do on the ceilings. Also, the lights seem to be quite tall or high up. if I'm not quite sure why the ceiling is so high, or why we need to go down, or indeed why there are mini tanks in this room when there's seemingly no way they can actually get out. So perhaps you want to do something with that, because that's a bit strange. You know, maybe turn this room into like a place that can be accessible from outside, but even so, you would not have tanks like these in such a small area. They need to be serviced, so you'd need to see like tool stations and stuff. What you could do, in fact, is perhaps even split this into multiple traps, like say 3 traps. You could open this area up, make it larger, make it a kind of a tank workshop, and then each of the tanks will be placed in a different position. The people would be forced to go through them, and you'd have 3 sets of tank traps then that you could activate. You could even activate them repeatedly if you wanted to. With a slight cooldown, you know, like 2 seconds, for instance. You could control the direction of the turrets by hitting buttons. So you'd have 3 buttons, you know, left, fire, and right, and then hitting left once would move it 20 degrees. And again, you know, what you can do is control the movement of the thing. I don't know how it moves, to be honest. If the lid is separate, you can parent it to a func rotating, and you can move func rotating by a certain amount, by a percentage, I think. Yeah. So let's say a func rotating has a percentage, or it has a progress of 0 to 1. You can set the or even add to, I think. I'm not entirely sure, but you could probably use a math counter and things like that. You know, you work it out. But yeah, reusable traps are pretty good actually. As long as you show people that a trap is reusable, not by having a sign that says this trap is reusable, but the simple thing here is that if the tank is still allowed to move afterwards, you know, people may realise that it is always dangerous. The challenge with having such an open area that people with 3 tanks would be to have the activator be able to control all 3 of them without needing to abandon them. Maybe what you could do is you could have the controls for all 3 tanks in a central area, so that you've got the controls of tank 1 on the left, tank 2 in the middle, and tank 3 on the right, and then the activator could go fire 1, fire 2, fire 3, you know, and then the button would go orange or something to say that you must wait, and then once it goes green again, that would indicate that it is now fireable. Or perhaps you could even play a sound effect using the point client command entity and play game sound, like a reload sound or something, or a dink sound to let you know that it's, or even just an ambient generic above the button, so that the activator can hear the button. You know, in fact, I believe a button, when it goes in and comes out again, it might be possible for it to play sound effects built in, like Half-Life buttons. You know, like when you try to press a button and it goes bidip, or if it's locked, it goes bidip, like that sort of thing. You know. Yeah. So you may not even have to use ambient generics. And then if the activator needed to disappear quickly to go to another trap, maybe they can have an automatic button that just fired the tanks automatically every 2 seconds, or put them on a cycle, you know. I don't know. It's a thought. Ah, health and safety nightmare. I've fallen down this ramp and I've crashed into these things at the bottom. Ah, I'm going to sue. Not necessary. Very narrow space here. Such a high ceiling, that doesn't make any sense. If this is just designed for pedestrians, then why is the ceiling so tall? I like the rock here. I think with such a large amount of exposed rock, you need to be able to shore it up. And the ways that architects would do that normally is to put gauze over it, or mesh, and then fill the mesh with concrete a little bit, plaster it, and then have smaller metal bars. And what that would do is it would anything that fell off the rock would be caught by the mesh, and the bars would hold it in place. But that might look a bit too detailed, so it's up to you. Or you could make the material here a simpler one, less detailed, and then do what I suggested. But that's detailing really. And as I said earlier, if you have something which is densely detailed, that draws the player's attention towards it, and this wall here serves no purpose, so there's no need to draw the player's attention towards it. You want to use dense detailing on objectives and traps so people know that they are something that is important. Oh. What? What's going on here? Okay. I appear to have gone down for some reason.
I'm not even
shrunk. I don't know why. That seems rather strange. Okay. That's weird. I would not do that. I would just make this area larger. I wonder. Okay. Wow, that's a lot of console spam. Okay, plus use doesn't do anything. That's good. That'd be fun though if people can blow themselves up or whatever. See, landmines are designed to be buried underground. It seems strange that people would leave them here when they can just be pulled out of the way with their handles. But whatever. Maybe it's a spillage out of crates or something. Speaking of which. Whoa! That was weird. Okay, I'll go through a vault door and end up in a bathroom. Oh, and these aren't solid. You made a bathroom with doors and you didn't let me open them. Also, what's this dark here? At least you should make these doors interactable and have toilets behind them. Or maybe have the voice lines say things like, leave me alone, comrade, or do you have toilet paper? And things like that. They wouldn't say comrade, would they, actually? Not socialists. So that's good. That's a bit strange. It looks like beams. There is a metal material which has no rivets on it. You could use that and then just add some detailing. Or even use a shiny metal surface. Like that. Presume it's an elevator. Clip, 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 clip. Unlit generic, really? Is this an illuminated Hitler sign? Ooh, a clock. Another elevator? I feel like I want to go down here, despite the fact that there's an arrow that says go in here. Interesting. Maybe it's because it's the end of the corridor and you sort of feel, naturally drawn to the end of the corridor. That's not a problem, I'm just commenting what I feel. Maybe you need to get more Hitler posters. What the hell's going on here? Okay, whatever. Is there a trap in here? That. That dirt? That looks just weird. So I'm guessing these are supposed to be Hitler's private quarters or something. These steps seem too large to be real, and they're not clipped. And that must be blood. Again, another elevator. You would have thought he would have escaped. Oh no! I didn't look at the code. Oh, I'm locked in place. Okay, plus use doesn't work. Oh, I died, I think.
You are so dumb. You don't even remember the key codes you got 10 minutes ago.
Wow, 10 minutes. Jesus, that's a big loud. Why am I being teleported constantly? Slightly annoying. My view keeps resetting to the center for some reason. Fuck me. 5. Okay. Fuck's sake. What? What? What's 2? 5? Whatever.
Finally, you are here. We meet once again. I know what you want to do with me, fucking Soviet army. Taking me to prison, interrogating and other things you've done with the Nazi army. Fuck you.
Nope.
I'm gonna escape using my secret technologies.
Time to hang myself. He just did a backflip through the desk. He shouldn't do that. Also, how do I get out? I don't like this clip in front of me. If I was a Soviet soldier and my objective was to capture Hitler, I wouldn't let him stand there and do a monologue and then disappear whilst an invisible wall stopped me. I would arrest him immediately or threaten him or shoot him. There should be something preventing me from getting to him, like a bulletproof glass. And then, you know, once he's gone, I finally get to go into his office or something like that. I'm quite sure what I'm supposed to be doing, to be honest. Maybe it's because I bypassed the door, and now I'm apparently dead. I see why your lighting is so dodgy here. Because you're using dynamic lights. Yeah. Do you know what? I think if you wanted to, it probably would be cheaper rather than having the bunker and then have dynamic lights where they use up, you know, a ton of light map data and their named entities and shit, and the lighting and the shading looks horrible. You could actually just duplicate the entire bunker and put it elsewhere in the map, and then once Hitler escapes, you could just teleport the player, all the players, to that other bunker that has this darkened lighting with a subdued redness. The players would have no knowledge that they've been teleported, if you use a landmark, that is. But obviously it would all look different. And what you could do is you could then take advantage of that by having things like furniture overturned, and things like the pictures falling off. Stuff like that, you know? Almost as if you're playing Half-Life and then something happens and then the map changes and you go into another map. It's the same area, it's just different, you know, it's a different physical map sort of thing. Okay. Yeah, I think I broke the map. Ooh, what's going on here? Presumably I'm supposed to have failed by now because I have Buddha mode on, so... Sorry about that.
You failed.
Scout, Miss Pauling here.
There shouldn't be an apostrophe in locations.
Friendship ends in 10
My
seconds.
turn now, bitches. Hopefully you don't have an AFK kicker.
4, 3, 2, 1. Begin.
2320.
Play ball.
Seems strange to me that there would just be a random board here with flashing numbers. Maybe instead you should have like an allied transmission where you receive a printout that shows you the code of the booth. Like, you know, incoming signal beep 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 beep, and then it prints out and it says, you know, code is 2320, whatever. And it's a time limited code. You have to use it like within the next 5 minutes or something, or it expires. And then if that happens, you can't get in, and instead you're forced to do something else rather than losing outright. You know, you're forced to maybe pursue Hitler or defuse a bomb or something. And what you could do is you could have the HUD timer, the round timer on the screen, team round timer, and you can use that for the expiry. The way you get the team round timer to appear in Deathrun maps, in arena maps that is to have a team round timer entity, but have it disabled by default or not shown. And then on arena round start, you then show it in the HUD and enable it or resume it, because what Team Fortress 2 does is when an arena map round starts, it sends an output to team round timer in general to not display in HUD. I don't know why, it's annoying, but it has that effect on every timer entity that is present. And then what you could do is, you know, at the end of the countdown, is trigger something like, you know, you fail to use the code in time, you're now locked out of whatever. You'll have to do something else, and in order to avoid the narrator from reading the voice lines, you know, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, things like that, you could use a sound script and do sound script replacements, and you can insert your own sound files. Even have, you know, a sound file that says you've run out of time, blah blah blah. Just bear in mind that Deathrun Redux, for some reason, it actually plays. Oh no, does it? I don't know. I'm not sure if it plays the team round, if it actually forces the team round timer WAV files itself, or if that's left up to the arena entity. I don't know. This corridor feels rather tight for an activator corridor. You don't really have to have a tunnel here because, you know, we know it's a game. We know we're going to be activating traps. You don't need to have a glass material. All we need to do is to have an area where we can run around freely and comfortably, whilst activating traps that will kill people, you know? we don't need this to be themed like it is. It's so tight I can feel myself bumping into displacement triangles. Also, the noise of the glass would give away my position and my proximity to the runners and my footsteps, so I'd move it back a bit. I also advise never using a material, a light mapped material for the partition wall, because as you can see here, your light entities have shone onto the material, and that reduces visibility over to the other side. Also looks dodgy as well. In my opinion, you should just use something like block bullets, because it's completely clear. Your vision of the runners is not interrupted at all, and you cannot spray on it, so your view of what's going on the other side cannot be obstructed by previous activators. Plus use doesn't appear to be working, and neither does weapons fire, strangely. Okay. When I was on the other side, there wasn't anywhere where the rocks could really fall from. What you could do is have another tunnel above with some planks holding them back, and then the planks could snap and then the rocks could fall down. You'd have a tunnel cave in, you know. I'm guessing that people have to push their way through here. Not sure. As an alternative to breaking rocks, you could force people to go different ways. Maybe it could also reveal other cave entrances, you know, in the Fallout. Natural caves, you know, which could have their own sets of hazards, like fall hazards, you know, and slip hazards, and stalagmites, stalactites, whatever they are, which could then serve as your spikes. They'd be natural spikes, you know, things like that. You'd have dripping water, echoes, etc. It's pretty cool. The buttons, you should make them plus usable, and you should also allow them to be shot by weapons fire, because on some servers that allow weapons, it's handy to be able to shoot buttons to activate traps from a distance away. You shouldn't force server operators to play a map your way. You should give them the option to play a map however they want, really. Because server operators like to make their experience unique for their runners and players and stuff. And if they're prevented from doing that, then, you know, they may feel that they can't provide a special experience for their players, and it may reduce the enjoyment of your map, because the players are used to having these abilities in other maps. Also, heads up, if you use the Slarties VRAD, or SRAD as I call it, now it properly allows light through a translucent material, so the lights on this side will actually shine through the material from this side. In Steamworks Extreme, sorry, what am I talking about? That's nonsense. I meant the other side. Yeah. In Steamworks Extreme, I have no light in the activators portion at all, because the light is provided by the lights in the runners section. But that was when I used older Valve VRADs to compile, and now as a consequence of using Slarties VRAD or SRAD, the light in the runner area, because the wall has a material which is 100% solid or opaque, it will not allow light through the brush, the partition wall, into my area, even though the brush has a tool texture on the other side. It used to be the case in Valve's tools that if a brush has a tool texture on it, then it becomes fully transparent to light and allows light through. But no, in SRAD, that's fixed in quotes. So you will still have to provide a bit of illumination here. But the downside is that any illumination on here, because this is a translucent material, will pass through into the side of the runners. So if you wanted to have, you know, special lighting here, you'd have to be careful that this lighting didn't interfere with that lighting, you know? So what I would do is just provide dim illumination on my side, just to give me an idea of where to go, you know, a sense of the path. I don't need full illumination because I can see where to go because I can see the side of the runners, you know? I like the fact that you've got the activators corridor on the inside of the traps and stuff. That means I can run around and get to places more quickly than the runners can. I don't really have any comments on this trap. It's pretty basic. The kill zone is there. That's a lot of fire. If you wanted to, you could have like gas pipes and an electric light that's flickering or something, I don't know. And then suddenly it's no, because that would cause a gas explosion, wouldn't it? That wouldn't make any sense. I don't know. Yeah, you could have just straightforward booby traps, but I think this could be spread out. Rather than just having a block of flames, you can have multiple jets of flame. That would be more elegant than having lots of pyro flame, what are they called? Particle systems. They tend to get overused, so if they're just used as single points of flame, then you know, you get to spread them out. You could turn that trap into 3 traps. You could even take a leaf out of Steamworks Extreme's book and you could combine them with other traps. So let's say you had this here. You have single planks, shorter areas, and you expand this trap to serve as a theme for this area, being a kind of booby trap tunnel. But then again, why would you booby trap your own tunnel, provided this, of course, is a tunnel that you've made yourself? I don't know. Perhaps you could have like a disused bunker or something, or a storage that the tunnel goes through. But my point is that in Steamworks Extreme, I try to combine multiple trap elements. For instance, the oven trap, it would have fire on one side, fire on the other side, and it would take turns, and then you'd have the door at the front and the door at the back, and they'd be on different timers. So let's say you had a short gap here with a plank, then you could have people do the first few plank traps, and they understand then what to do. Then you could have some fire, you know, occasionally, and then they go, oh look, fire, and they'd see what they had to do, and then you could then combine them, so you've got a plank with fire on, so people know that there's 2 traps in one, and they have to be a bit more careful about where they stand. Maybe you could have like plank, fire, plank or something, you know, but still try and give people the opportunity to kind of retreat, and just punish them for their poor accuracy and timing and judgment and things like that. This is better, I can see more clearly, but this illumination on the floor here, this is quite bright and it's rather distracting. Oh, how did I go back here? It's uncomfortable to look at. Was that red? You know, I'm like, my eyes. So this doesn't need to be illuminated, really. You could just get rid of the lights and just have a very small amount of illumination. Maybe even provide a little bit of texture rather than having blackness here, but whatever. Okay, normally thick metal walls don't just appear out of thin air. I would try to improve that by making it more realistic. So things like that would likely be doors that come down, and for the doors to be realistic, they need to move pretty slowly. They couldn't just go bang, because that would be silly. And in order to provide that realism, you can't just have them go down slowly because people could go, oh shit, and jump out and the trap would be useless. So the solution there would be to make the trap a bit wider. And then you've got a little bit of time to get out, but you'd have, let's say, you could either go backwards or you could go forwards, and let's say you took the medic as an example, or a run speed of 400 units per second. You could find out when they'd be able to leave, at what point the door would stop or prevent you from leaving, and then work out how long it takes for it to go down. And then you could say, right, I want people to be able to escape if they're like 200 units away there and 200 units away there. So you'd have an area in the middle which is virtually guaranteed death, you know, but you'd have people like at the end or the beginning who would still have an opportunity to escape. It'd be more difficult if you just walk into a trap, you know, and the door's behind you, and then you see the door in front of you in the distance starting to lower. You'd go, oh shit, what do I do? And you might run forwards, or you might go, oh shit, and turn around and try to get under the door. You know, that, if you just step into a trap, that tests you more, I think. Because what people do when they're under pressure, they can panic, you know, and they don't make very good decisions, or they could keep calm and they can go, right, I've just come through a door, that one's closing, assuming this door works the same way, all I need to do is turn around and walk through it, you know. So you're kind of rewarding players' skill and knowledge, but of course across a few playthroughs people would learn how to do that anyway, so it wouldn't really be that interesting. Okay. Right, so is that done now? Right. So they're still looking. I presume that this is some form of animation then. Okay. So this reminds me of the Daleks. This is a bit strange. Ah! So people come around here.
Finish him.
Oh. Okay. There's no indication. No indication that there's a trap here at all. This smoke is rather annoying, has to be said. I don't like traps where things just appear out of nowhere. They're rather basic. I try to come up with a more interesting trap idea here. Maybe you could spot Hitler. You know, maybe you sort of see him in the corner. When you come around the corner, he'd be there, and then you'd go, "Stop you!" And then he'd go, "Ah, I'm disappearing now," and then he'd run around the corner, and then you try and run after him, and then you go into a trap or something. Maybe Hitler springs a trap, and a railing comes down, blocking you in place, and then preventing you from escaping, and then you have to sort of dodge some obstacles. A bit like the saw blade trap in Steamworks Extreme, where you go on the planks and there's no way you're getting off. When you're on the planks, the trap is activated, and the point of the trap is not to escape quickly. The point of the trap is to dodge the saw blades, you know? That's an idea anyway. You could do anything here as long as you'd sort of remove the magically appearing Hitler that does dance moves at you. But it's your map. Oh my god, where do I go? Okay. Yeah. Okay, nothing needs to be said there. Oh, I only just started to hear that music. A basic static hazard. Not much I can suggest to do with this, really. I mean, you can do one of two things. One is you could do the Steamworks Extreme route, where you take every basic trap and you sex it up by adding a secondary hazard to it. For instance, if I were to make this more difficult, I would include a second element. The one element is the static bombs here, mines. You can see where they are, they don't move. You know the idea is to move through them. The secondary element would be perhaps a sweeping laser grid. So let's say you had a path through the mines that you could see. You know how you get those traps where you have to go through, like round some corners, and there's a laser that goes through them, and you have to sort of wait for the laser to disappear, and you quickly run around the corner and then stop again, and the laser, you know, you've seen them. There's one in Four Halls, one of Burke's maps, I think. Can't remember. But anyway, what you have here is essentially the same thing. It's a bunch of corners, except the difference is there are no walls. The walls are mines. And so you can see, you know, the route just by looking at it. You can also see the lasers come towards you. So what you have to do is you have to get through the trap. So you have to first be very careful not to trigger a mine by moving slowly through it. But at the same time, if you see the laser grid come towards you, you need to quickly get into cover. And the laser grid could be different each time. I say by getting into cover, I mean choosing a blank space that is not occupied by mine, where the laser is not coming at you. So let's say you had like a grid of 4, you know, 4 wide. Just as an example, what you'd have is 4 lasers coming towards you, but one of them would be off each time. And so you'd see it coming towards you, and you'd go, oh, I see it's the second laser which is not currently on. So you'd stand here, and then the laser grid would go over you, and then you'd know to then move. And then if you were still in the mine grid, then you'd see the lasers come at you again. It would make a noise to alert you of the lasers coming. They'd start a bit of a distance into the, well, bit into the distance to give you some time to react. This kind of trap would also then work well if multiple players are using it at once, because if people are obscuring your vision, it makes it more difficult for you to see where the lasers and the mines are, so they would be less likely to go in at once. And I'd also make that wider, make the whole grid wider, you know, and force people to stay in it for a certain amount of time, because you'd get much more use out of this trap then. It would last longer, it'd be more interesting. But you could also, the second way you could change things is to take this static hazard element and use it elsewhere in the map. So you'd have it in multiple locations, a bit like what I suggested in the tunnels. You'd have like at the start of the map somewhere, you'd have some of these, you know, like 1 or 2 just lying around, and people would see them and go, oh look, I'm mine, I best avoid them. And then later on you could put some more in, but they'd be a little bit more difficult, and then later you could include them in other traps, so they form more hazardous elements, and by that time players will know that these cause explosions when stepped on, so they need to be avoided. And what you're doing is you're taking something that the player is familiar with and then using it in a different way, and then combining it with something else to enhance the experience, and also get players to use more than one thing that they've learned at once. I hope I explained myself well there. Okay, so I'm in Hitler's private bunkers here, I think. Haven't seen many traps yet, but you did say there were only 10 to 12. So what happens here? Not sure. Okay. I'm not sure what traps here, but I presume after a while something explodes and you get exploded as well. If that is the case, maybe this takes a bit too long. What you could do is actually use this as a prop, just to dress the scene with that going on in the background, and you know, just make it a bit more interesting rather than using it as a prop, as a trap element. I like the fact that you've got the historical radio broadcast as well in the map. That's good. This just to let you know, buttons and stuff. What I usually advise is for you to get a clip brush the same thickness of the button and to place it over the front. And so when you run against the buttons, you don't get caught on them. The reason I suggest that is because as an activator, I like to run around quickly to catch people, and sometimes if you get caught on something and you miss them and you lose, then it's really frustrating. So what was it? 2820? Oh, 2220. Okay, so it seems that my luck has run out. Okay. 3. Right, yeah. See, that's not very useful. I don't understand what's going on here, but it doesn't seem to work like the bank thing, where if you fuck up the code, it doesn't immediately kill you. Maybe I should go back and read the thing again.
You are so dumb. You don't even remember that code you got 10 minutes ago.
Right, yeah. So if you get it wrong, you're constantly teleported. Right. Whatever. Well, I don't know what happens after this, to be honest. Hopefully Bert can help me. I'll just take a bit of a fly around whilst I'm waiting.
Finally, you are here. We meet once again. I know what you want to do with me, fucking Soviet army. Taking me to prison, interrogating, and other things you've done with the Nazi army. Fuck you. Escape using my secret technologies.
I like the voice acting. It doesn't sound very German, but it's still quite funny.
Mission begins in 10 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hi, Burke.
Fight to the death.
Perhaps you could help me. I've reached the end, 3118, and I put the wrong code in. I don't know what happens after that, so enable Buddha on yourself, and you can just go straight to the end, and you can show me what happens afterwards if you would. So whilst we're on the subject of what's going on here, I had no idea that you go in there to actually start the game. I thought you had to go around here. It's not really very clear where you have to go. Then I guess storming Hitler's compound is interesting. Iceberg. Okay, I seem to have lost you. Oh, there you are. Wow, that didn't take you long to run through. Yeah, please do, because I don't know what happens when you put the right code in. Oh, I see. So from this point onwards, just play the game as
Finally,
normal.
you are here. We meet once again. I know what you want to do with me, fucking Soviet army. Taking me to prison, interrogating and other
I'll
things
just
you've
follow
done
you.
with the Nazi army. Fuck you. I'm gonna escape using my secret technologies.
Appreciate it.
Dominate him. Crush his
The fuck?
bones to powder.
What's that? Where's that medic come from? Oh, I've lost you. Jesus. Right, so you run out the map the same way you came in. That's pretty cool. This is, I like this. I like the fact that you have to escape the same way you came in. But, it's funny. Wow, that's, overkill. What the fuck? That's not how rockets work. Nice. It's up to you, mate. Stalin, okay. So it's a game where I have to do what Hitler says. You should stop the music.
Welcome to Hitler Says minigame. This minigame you should do everything that I tell you, or else you will die. Got it? Alright, let's begin. Hitler says, touch the red wall. 3, 2, 1.
Excuse me?
Stand on the red square. 3.
I'm on the red square. Why did I lose health?
Hitler says, stand on the white square. 3, 2.
Oh, unless he didn't say Hitler says.
Hitler
Okay.
says, stand on the brown square. 3, 2.
What is the brown square?
Hitler
It's like
says,
orange.
stand on the blue square. 3, 2, 1. Touch the black wall. 3,
Lol.
2, 1. Hitler says, stand on the gray square. 3, 2, 1. Hitler says, stand on the yellow square. 3, 2, 1. Touch the Stalin wall. 3,
Touch the Stalin wall.
1. Hitler says, crouch. 3, 2,
Okay.
1. Hitler says, stand between the squares. 3, 2,
Lol.
1. Stand on the green square. 3,
No.
2, 1. Hitler says, stand on the pink square. 3, 2.
I think you could probably make this look a lot better.
Hitler says, touch the Stalin wall. 3, 2, 1. Stand on the red square. 3, 2, 1. Hitler says, touch the black wall. 3, 2, 1. Hitler says, you
fuck?
stand on the black square. 3, 2, 1.
I'm pretty sure I...
Hitler
Oh, yeah.
says, you stand on the green square. 3, 2, 1. You stand on the black square. 3, 2, 1.
Yeah, his "you fucking moron"
Scout, Miss
line
Pauling.
Crouch.
plays over the
3,
you know, the instructions. Also, maybe you should have
10 seconds.
text instructions for people who don't have
4, 3, 2, 1. Begin.
Let's get
don't have ears. 6828. Okay. I think you're missing a wall over there. Maybe you shouldn't let people just make the thing disappear. Maybe you should keep it.
Yeah, thanks.
Also a tip. If you remove the origin from Funk brushes, or any brush in fact, that will allow you to spray on it. All you have to do is you go into Hammer, open it up, the brush that is, and maybe you have to use turn Smart Edit off, I don't know. But you just delete the origin value and then compile with that, save and compile. The only thing is, I think next time you open the VMF, the origin is reinserted. So it's something you have to kind of repeatedly do every time you work on the map and are about to compile. It's a shame, but you know, it's fun, because if the brush comes back again and people see their sprays on it, then that's something you could use. One thing I was interested doing is actually making a spray wall that moves, and perhaps even as part of a mini game. So you'd have like a wall in a map at the start, people would spray on it, and then later the wall would get teleported around or even moved, and you'd see your own spray stuff, you know. Bit of a fun thing. Perhaps you could have like spray boxes where people can spray on certain places, maybe like picture frames and shit, and then those boxes will form parts of the map later on.
Finish him.
I'm not sure where the boundaries of the trap are, so I'll just get out of the way.
Thanks, Pally.
Fatality.
Hopefully I'm not going to die here. Okay. I guess that you get sucked in here? Also, you could line up the if the floor tiles were 64 units exactly, then you could line the mines up with that. In Steamworks Extreme, I use a distance of 64 units between each barrel, because that's the I believe that's the width of a player hull. I'm not entirely sure though, but it seems to be a good figure to use. Hitler and his disco ball.
Yeah.
Is it 6118? No.
Here in the second, we see further evidence of the ruthless Nazi war machine in action on the Russian front. In the ghastly turmoil of battle, the invading Huns fling their weight against the Soviet lines, shelling the Russian tanks at point-blank range with anti-tank and siege guns. In the region of Brest-Litovsk, the German thrust at the USSR was held up by a destroyed bridge across the River Bug.
Yeah, there's no feedback here as to whether or not the code is correct. Are you giving me multiple chances or what, you know? Am I just punching in random shit? Makes no sense. Oh. I died.
You are
You are always a disappointment.
That's weird.
Scout, Pauling here. This one came right from the administrator.
Is there a motivator, I wonder? So,
You failed.
Finally, you're here. We meet once again.
now I'm not quite sure about
Me,
trap
fucking
ideas.
Soviet army, taking me to prison, interrogating and other things you've done with the Nazi army. Fuck you. I'm gonna escape using my secret technique.
Friendship ends
I mean-
in 10 seconds.
You have to think about the object of the game.
4, 3, 2,
The object of the game is presumably to assassinate Hitler,
fight.
8687.
Let's waste them.
We know that we can't do that because he escapes. But obviously we don't know that right now. So if the idea is to capture Hitler, then what you would expect to face is resistance, and the resistance could be in the form of soldiers. So maybe you could have some traps with soldiers and stuff, sentries perhaps, if you've ever played a stealth game like what's it called, Metal Gear Solid. You know, you have like guards that walk up and down a corridor, and then they have like a detection radius in front of them, and they stop at the end of the corridor, and they look around, and then they turn around, and then they start to walk backwards. So perhaps you could have like a stealth element where you have to go through corridors and stuff without getting spotted by the soldiers or sentries. You know, I'm not quite sure how you'd do that. I suppose you could use robots, and it'd be a little bit like Wolfenstein then, and then just have them do walking animations and stuff, and playing sound effects, and you could have the scan radius using a brush or something like that. So yeah, because there were no soldiers or anything, it's just traps and corridors. Also, I would expect some false rooms. So for instance, you could have like a false path. A little bit like a chance door. I'm not sure, but it would be booby trapped, but you'd have like an opportunity to notice the booby trap. So let's say I was forced to go into a particular corridor, and I found like a door.
Thanks, mate.
And the door, I have to open the door, you know? In fact, there's a bunch of doors that you can open. You can press the button boop, to open the door. But some doors are booby trapped, and there are ways to know whether or not a door is booby trapped, but they could be really subtle. Maybe they could even be a bit like the code system that you have earlier on. The code could be used to get into the vault at the end, but maybe the code could also be used to work out which doors are booby trapped and which aren't. Perhaps doors with odd numbers on them are booby trapped and things like that, you know? I don't know. Or the booby trapness could be really subtle, so you could have a slightly different shade of LED light or bulb or something on the control panel, or the door could be open very slightly, or maybe there could be a faint ticking sound coming from behind a door. The same, you could also have false floors, and the false floors would be tiled. And then the false floors which break could have tiles which are reversed, maybe, or they'd have bricks slightly out of place. I don't know. Or perhaps you could have like Hitler's face as a tile, and perhaps Hitler's face could normally be smiling, and then if you see a tile and Hitler's face is frowning, then you know that's a trapped floor. If you were to make like a tank area, I've already spoken about what you could do to improve the tank traps here, but perhaps you could have additional traps in a kind of tank service zone. You could have like a a fuel area where you have massive vats of fuel, and if you go through them, perhaps it would apply a condition to you, like put fuel on you or something, and then if you got next to like a source of ignition, it would set you on fire. Things like that, Perhaps you could have like fuel spill everywhere, and then you'd have obstacles, and you have to jump on the obstacles to get across. But if you touch the fuel, then you get like that sticky foot condition, which makes you slower and prevents you from jumping or something for like a minute, and that affects you in the next trap or something. Maybe it lessens your chances of surviving in a future trap, or perhaps you need to wire something which causes an electric spark, and then if you are in this condition, then you are set alight. Maybe you could even have water as well, and you'd have to run over to the water to extinguish yourself. You could even have some trapped water vats which are actually acid in disguise. Booby-trapped crates. Something I was coming up with in Castle Stevie 3 was the concept of booby-trapped barrels. What I wanted to do was have something where you couldn't progress to the next area until you had pressed a button somewhere. So you get to the end, and then you sort of have to press a button, and that would then reveal a button somewhere on the path that you've just been down. So you'd have to go back and you'd have to locate the hidden button or find a key, which could be an intelligence item, and then in order to find it, what you do is you'd destroy barrels, but sometimes the barrels would have spikes underneath them. The only problem is, of course, that people could just destroy the barrels before they reach the end, which is a bit silly. But then again, I suppose it would save them the trouble of breaking the barrels later on. And if a barrel broke and it spawned a bomb, then you would be caught unawares, so you'd have to, that kind of thing. Maybe you could have a crate which bursts open and snakes come out. I don't know, that's ridiculous, but whatever.
Victory.
Oh. So, environmental hazards.
Mission begins in 10 seconds.
Yeah, that's weird. You've got a bunker system, you've got tunnels. Is that a server crash? Guess we'll find out. Tunnels, of course, caves and stuff, liable to have cave-ins if not constructed properly. Perhaps what you could do is you could actually have a system where you construct the tunnels by hammering out pieces of wood. You could have like a partially made tunnel, and you could have pieces of wood on the left, on the right, and the top, and they would be like 50% transparent but still solid, and people had to come up and hammer them for them to be put in place, and then they'd become solid, and then you'd have a little puff of smoke and like a sound that indicates dropping or being put in place or something.
Scout, it's Pauling. This isn't a social call.
And
about
then
work.
You'd have to continue to build the tunnel, and as you did, portions of the tunnel would be revealed. So but in revealing the tunnels, the possibility of a cave-in might happen. So you'd have to sort of look out for things like that. Or maybe you could open pits that you could fall in, in the process of building the tunnels. You could have the tunnels go off in different directions as well. So let's say you were on a server with 24 players and you got 23 people on the red team. You can't really have all those players going down that one tunnel and just hammering away at the wooden beams, because that would be difficult and people could block them. So what you'd do is you'd split them up into multiple groups. So if you halved them, that would be 12 people, and then halve them again, that would be 6 people. 6 is probably a reasonable number, but then you have to take into account places like Skyle. So that would give you, say, an example. You could have 4 sets of constructible tunnels, and each of them could have their own potential randomized hazards. So each round, when you construct a tunnel, you don't know if it's going to be hazardous or not. You could even have disused landmines that fall on the ground and arm with an audible sound that people have to then avoid. You know, things like that. So, and then the Nazis obviously didn't have lasers, but they did probably, I mean, they could easily make things like electrified fences, you know. You have to stay away from electrified fences or you'd get shocked and you may get killed, or if you're standing in water and the electrified fence enables, you would get electrocuted, stuff like that. And the electricity could come and go, and it could be an automated hazard, a bit like with the thing that I suggested with the mines. So you'd have the static hazard, which is the water and the electricity and stuff, and the automated hazard would be the electricity. But you could make that manual by just having the activator trigger the electric, but there'd have to be a slight delay before the electricity is triggered. Like, you know, for the generator to wind up or something, or you could have the electricity start and immediately begin to reduce health. So players would reduce health and then have to go back onto the a platform. You know, so it wouldn't be a trap about killing people outright. It would be a trap about reducing people's health and then making it more dangerous for them later on. So if there was a trap that required care, for instance, navigating through something, and if you touch something, you reduce health, or maybe a fall damage. Then if you were on low health, then that would make it extremely difficult for you, very dangerous, you know. So yeah, environmental hazards. You've just got some corridors here. There isn't really much in the way of hazards and stuff you can put in there. I like the fact that the rope has Christmas lights on it. Did you know also, an interesting thing is that the Christmas lights, the density of the Christmas lights is controlled by the density of the textures. So if you have the texture quite dense, I think that's it, or the slack, I'm not entirely sure. Or the number of segments of rope, you know. It could be the resolution of the texture. It's a while since I've messed with ropes. Then that affects the number of lights on the rope. It's posh. Oh, you actually got a soundscape. Okay. Ah, that looks like the training area. Oh, very interesting. So where's Hitler's bunker? Pro tip as well, if you work with dev textures, then when you're finished detailing, you can just do a find and replace for your dev textures and just replace them all with no draw. You seem to have a skybox that extends too far around the boundaries of the map here. Everything is being rendered, so I would guess that the entirety of this outside area is also being rendered. You could probably do with clipping the, you know, making it smaller. I'm not quite sure what this area is. Oh, it could be Skybox. Okay, here we are. This is what I was trying to find. Yeah, so the bunkers and shit, hazardous environments and stuff. We've got toilets, but there's no way to get down apart from elevators and shit. I don't know. Elevator malfunctions? No. I see you now, actually. Not sure. Maybe you could have several layers of security that you have to get through. And the layers of security could be puzzles. Because this is the final area, you want to make it a bit more challenging. And you'll have fewer players as well, so you can afford to have traps that challenge individuals rather than the group. You start off your map with traps which are easiest, and which are designed for the largest number of players, and you end your with traps that are hardest and are designed for the smallest number of players. So individual puzzles here, maybe even a sacrifice trap or something, where if you've got a couple of people, if a trap is extremely difficult, you can have one person sacrifice themselves to make the trap easier. The way you could do that is by having somebody lock themselves into a gas-filled room, which controls something on the outside. Sacrifice is quite interesting. It's an interesting game mechanic that's that's often used. Most of the time, sacrifices for chance doors, but chance doors are unfair. They don't give you the choice of whether to sacrifice yourself. You're just taking a chance roll in the dice. Another thing, if you had an underground environment here, you would have air vents as well, because the air needs to go up somewhere. So you want to bear that in mind. Air swap out and things. You also need some indication of how deep you are. So I would put on the walls like 100 foot below ground or something, and then as you go through the facility, you get deeper, and you see different signs that tell you different depths or whatever. Another thing you might want to consider is for the escape is, rather than just have people run back out the map, make it a bit more interesting. Increase the length of time, but re-enable some of the traps or change them. You remember earlier on how I said create a second bunker area with all the different lighting and different props and stuff in different positions? Well, what you could do is you could have these props like electricity substations, explosives, firearms, closets, etc., water systems, air vent systems, and so on. And in your second version of the bunker, when Hitler tries to escape using his secret methods, is you can have the base self-destruct sequence activated, and that begins a set of explosions. And what happens is that the first explosions, they don't kill you. They shake things about, but they also cause the props and stuff to fall over and smash and be destroyed, and that can also create more hazards. So let's say in order to escape, you come back out of Hitler's office, and maybe an elevator, here, you press the button and the elevator comes down and smashes and causes you to lose a bit of health, or maybe it opens up and there's some explosives there. Perhaps there's a very small chance, like a 1 in 10 chance of an elevator coming down and actually being an escape route. Perhaps not necessarily for all players. Maybe the elevator can have a maximum occupancy, but then those people can just go up to the top, and then they could escape straight away. But people escaping wouldn't immediately end the countdown. It would just give some people the opportunity to escape straight away. So you give people different opportunities, different ways to escape, and that could be the same of each elevator. Some elevators, a small chance of, or every elevator will have a small chance of allowing you to have a small number of players escape. Otherwise, they would either say out of service, out of service, out of service, or not working, or power could be off. Sometimes they could have open up with explosives. Other times, they could open up and give you an alternative route to safety. So let's say, for instance, you've got 2 elevators here side by side. If one of them opened and there was no cab behind it, perhaps what you can have is like a slightly damaged elevator. You open it up, go behind the elevator, and then now imagine you're in a set of elevator shafts, like a conjoined or communal shaft, and you can see another elevator to your right. Maybe think safety, not safety first, think PlayStation. You could jump up onto the elevator, you could snap the cables, and then perhaps the elevator would start to rise upwards. Maybe you could hotwire it, or you could find a safety ladder or something, and then you could start to ascend. Perhaps what you could do is you could have the ladder go all the way up, and have platforms, and then you could have falling debris, so that when you go up, you would have to sort of like look out for the debris, and you'd have to sort of like dodge it by jumping off the ladder quickly or going onto a platform, You could have sentries come out of previously closed panels in walls, and you'd have to sort of run past the sentries maybe. But obviously you need a way to avoid the sentries, so perhaps what you could do is you could have like a sentry here, and then you could have fallen obstacles. They would be like one obstacle here, one there, and then one there, and the idea would be that you'd have to run, like wait until the sentry looks at the opposite side and then run behind cover before the sentry spots you and shoots you, and then wait for the sentry to look away again and then run behind the other piece of cover. You'd have to really time it well. You could allow a spy to sap the sentry, I suppose, if you wanted to. That's up to you. Maybe if the spy sapped the sentry, it would do something else, like reveal another sentry on the other side. I don't know. Plumbing issues. Maybe water could come up and start to flood. Come along here, go down the stairs, and then you'd have electricity, things like that. And maybe you could have to have like fallen obstacles. You'd have to jump on them to get over the electrified water. I know it's been done before, but the thing about having traps that have been done before in a map is that as long as they're simple and easy to do, and you have a lot of them, a good supply of them, then it makes the map interesting. And another thing is, of course, you can have you don't have to have the same traps on each playthrough. You could have different traps, so people weren't always experiencing the same kinds of hazards, which would make it more interesting as well. They wouldn't feel like the map would be the same on each run. You could have like the way to do it, I think, would be to have like a certain kind of trap 80% of the time, and then 20% of the time, or 1 in 5 chance, you'd have a different kind of trap. Or maybe 3 times out of 5 you'd have a style of trap, and then 2 times out of 5, so it'd be less common. So people will go, oh, it's the such and such trap, Excuse me. So yeah, you could make the escape a bit more interesting. More traps, or the traps that were there before are activated again, or maybe have some kind of automated fashion that people have to avoid, You don't want to make it too difficult, because the pressure of the time will make people panic, especially with red flashing lights and stuff. So, nothing like Steamworks extreme level difficulty, but again, it's up to you, your map. You could also have a secondary exit out of Hitler's office. You could even follow him using his secret methods. Perhaps you have a very small chance or a secondary puzzle which would unlock his secret escape hatch. Don't know. That's about all I can come up with for the time being. So I'm going to end the video there. I think I've gone on for long enough. Perhaps if we did like some playtesting on your latest version, we could come up with some trap ideas, you know, a bunch of us together. I think that'd be quite good. Yeah. Right, so there you go. I hope what I've said was useful to you. If you've got any questions, please do ask. Good stuff. I shall stop it now. How do I stop it? Whoop.